We all know this. The country needs a basic income grant, and it's one of the suggestions of a panel appointed by the Social Development Department. The COVID-19 relief grant is set to end in March, and this panel has been sitting down discussing how to try and take the support further. Let's find out if it's even possible and how do we make it work. Joined by the Director of the Studies in Poverty and Inequality Institute, it's Isobel Frye. Morning to you, Isobel. Good to have you on eNCA. So tell me about the panel discussion. How realistic is it, do you believe, that we could keep this grant in place?
Sure. Thanks for the invitation, Gareth. In fact, the panel discussion yesterday was the launch of a report that's a combination of about 6 months' work. About 9 top economists across the country and also some global experts, international experts came in, and they interrogated a number of critical issues. The first that you mentioned is there a need for a basic income grant? And the findings were overwhelmingly in favor of that. In fact, what the panel found was quite staggering. For instance, the fact that 29 million people in South Africa live under the food poverty line of 624 Rand per month, and that 1,300, the upper bound poverty line, finds 30 million people living below that. So on the one hand, we have incredible demand. We also have high inequality, and we've known that. But again, the findings from the panel show that the top 10% of South Africans have an average income of about 25,600 Rand per month, whereas the next 10% of people in the 9th income decile only live on an average of 9,000 Rand. So that discrepancy is incredibly huge between the top 10% and the next 10%. So we have a huge need, we have a huge demand. And what the panel found was that continuing the social relief of distress, the 350 Rand grant, is essential after March. In fact, for the bottom 20% of households, the only income that they're getting is from grant income. So if we're wanting to shock the economy into recovery, we need to be directing income into that. And so the findings show, really exciting findings, and it was helped by the ILO, the International Labour Organization, in terms of the bringing together of the panel. So I think the question is, now that government has this report with very clear recommendations and also very clear warnings of what would happen if they don't follow these recommendations, we need to see government taking leadership and implementing these recommendations.
And I don't think many people, Isobel, would argue with what the findings suggesting. I think everyone is very, very aware of how bad it is. But when you put into the stats that you have, you've got a really clear idea of just how bad it is for what seems to be too many people in South Africa. Here's the key question, though, and this might be my last question because of time, Isobel. Where does the money come from?
The panel was conservative in finding the financing, the resources, which is very useful, I think, for a panel that's advising government. But they found a number of very clear areas where money could be found. And in fact, a number of people who work within public finance say that there are sources that could be used, and my research institute, SPY, has come up with a number of different areas. The other thing, Gareth, that we need to remember is that for every Rand spent through cash transfers, there's a multiplier that actually generates more money. So having found the initial money, and as I say, the report, I won't go into the details, is very clearly set out. By the implementation, we're actually generating more revenue for the state. So it's a positive cycle that starts. And so, as you said, people will not argue the fact that we need this. The question is how we implement it, how rapidly and when. And the recommendations show social relief of distress 350 must continue when it is due to come to an end in March next year. And from then on, we use that to build the implementation of a very positive cycle through the basic income grant.
Perhaps let me leave this as my last question to you, Isobel. Time slightly against us. Government, of course, no doubt, is going to read this report. March is not far away. We're just about to say goodbye to Christmas and 2021. March doesn't give much time to implement this. Do you think it's realistic by the time we get to the end of this deadline to put in what this report is recommending?
Absolutely, and I think that's, again, why the panel took a bit longer than they'd initially been briefed to, because they were very clear about the rollout steps. In fact, Gareth, at this point in time, 9 million people are receiving the 350 grant. SUS has done an incredible job in terms of enrolling people onto that. So the basic infrastructure is there. and it's just about building onto that, using what we have. I think the idea of a single social registry that links between Home Affairs, the UIF, as well as SASSA is important, but we don't need to do that bells and whistles right now. We can do the incremental build and ensure that nobody goes without food. But as you say, it's essential. Christmas is coming, and yet we know that 30 million people are going to be facing Christmas on under 1,300 Rand for an entire household. So this is clearly something that we need. And for the state to announce, I think, would be the best Christmas gift ever.
I think we should all just take a moment and imagine what a Christmas must feel like in a family that's earning 1,300 Rand a month. Isobel Frye, thank you very much. I've enjoyed all the statistics you've given us here on eNCA. Hopefully government is listening. No doubts. We'll follow up with Isobel Frye, Director of the Studies in Poverty and Inequality Institute, as we get towards the end of March. It's not long to go. Let's see what happens with this report.